Imagine for a second that you are exploring the attic of some incredibly old, dusty library. And tucked away in a corner, you stumble across this survival guide.
Oh, I love a good library find.
Right. But as you open it, you realize this isn't like a manual for starting a fire or finding clean water in the wilderness. It is actually a survival guide for human nature.
Which is arguably way more useful.
Exactly. So you start flipping the pages, and even though it was written thousands of years ago, it perfectly diagnoses the anxiety you feel about your office politics or the quiet dread of your credit card debt, and even the psychological drain of that one constantly outraged person in your social feed.
Yeah, that is a very real drain.
It really is. And that ancient survival guide we're talking about is Proverbs 22. What is truly compelling here isn't just that it offers, practical life hacks, but how accurately it maps the underlying mechanics of why we make the choices we do.
Well, and it's a profound text because it strips away all the technological and cultural noise we surround ourselves with today.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of noise.
We really do. I mean,
Yeah.
we tend to think our modern problems are highly unique, right? Like that no one before the era of smartphones or advanced financial markets could possibly understand our stress.
Oh, absolutely. We think we're the first ones to ever be stressed out.
Exactly. But human nature is literally the one constant in history. Proverbs 22, which is traditionally attributed to Solomon, basically operates on the premise that the fundamental drives of humanity, pride, fear, greed, and that desire for connection, they haven't shifted a single inch.
Not an inch. And before we get too deep into the weeds, I want to lay out the game plan for you, the listener, for this deep dive.
Sounds good.
So first, we are going to briskly summarize the core teachings of this ancient text, and then seamlessly transition into applying those exact principles to modern life. And the mission here is to tackle both of those in under 9 minutes, just to really respect your time.
That is a fast turnaround, but I think we can do it.
We can definitely do it. And then for the rest of our time, we're going to spend the remainder of the deep dive exploring the ultimate goal of these proverbs, like how living out this wisdom can profoundly strengthen our trust and relationship with God.
I love that structure because the text certainly doesn't waste any time getting to the core of those human drives.
No, it really just dives right in.
It opens with this incredibly stark prioritization. Verse 1 basically states that a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold.
Which, I mean, we often hear that as a nice moral platitude, but if you think about an ancient agrarian society where physical wealth literally meant the difference between surviving a famine or starving, elevating reputation above tangible assets is a massive claim.
It is a huge claim, yeah. And there is a deep socioeconomic reality behind it, because in a high-trust ancient community, your reputation was your ultimate currency.
Right. It was all you had, really.
Exactly. If you had a bad harvest but a pristine name, your neighbors would lend you grain because your character was basically the collateral.
Oh, wow. Character as collateral. I like that.
Yeah. But if you had storehouses full of silver, but a reputation for deceit, you would be entirely isolated the moment disaster struck. Wealth can be stolen or lost in a market crash, but a good name represents a network of trust.
Which translates flawlessly into the modern trust economy, honestly. If we think about how business or even personal relationships function today, your credibility is the bottleneck for every single opportunity.
Complete.
You can have the highest salary in your friend group, but if people know you lack integrity, your actual influence is zero. People will, take your money, but they won't follow your leadership.
Yeah, and the text follows that up with a principle that establishes the baseline for how we are supposed to treat each other within that network of trust.
Okay, what's the baseline?
Verse 2 says, "The rich and poor meet together. The Lord is the maker of them all." And to appreciate the weight of that, you really have to remember that the ancient world was rigidly hierarchical.
Right, very class-based.
Very. Human value was almost entirely tied to utility and class. So this verse introduces a radical egalitarianism, asserting that human dignity is inherent and divinely assigned. It's completely untethered from a person's net worth.
I mean, if everyone has equal inherent value, then our daily interactions shouldn't be filtered through a lens of what someone can do for us. It fundamentally disrupts that human tendency to categorize people by their usefulness.
It really does. It levels the playing field completely.
But beyond how we view others, the text shifts heavily into how we view the future and our own responsibility. Which brings us to the contrast between foresight and laziness.
Oh, this is one of my favorite parts.
Same. Verse 3 talks about the prudent person foreseeing danger and taking cover, while verse 13 paints this incredibly vivid, almost comical picture of avoidance. It says, "The slothful man saith, there is a lion without, I shall be slain in the streets."
That is easily one of the most psychologically astute observations in the entire chapter.
See, I have to admit, I've always found that verse a bit confusing.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, because if someone tells me there is a literal mountain lion roaming my neighborhood, I'm absolutely locking my doors and staying inside.
Right, naturally.
On the surface, that sounds like the exact prudence verse 3 is talking about. So how do we differentiate between a prudent person making a smart safety call and a slothful person who is just inventing a lion to avoid doing the work?
That is a great question. And the key is the objective reality of the threat.
Okay.
The prudent person in verse 3 is looking at actual, verifiable data. They see a storm coming on the radar, so they reinforce the roof. Their action, or strategic inaction, is tied to reality.
So they're dealing with facts.
Exactly. The slothful man in verse 13, however, is dealing in manufactured anxiety. He lives in a bustling ancient city. The statistical probability of a wild lion roaming the market square is practically zero.
Oh, I see. So he's just making it up.
Yes. He has invented an absurd, catastrophic scenario, specifically to justify why he cannot possibly go outside and do his work.
Wow. So he is weaponizing a highly improbable fear just to protect his ego from the reality of his own laziness.
That is exactly what he's doing.
That hits uncomfortably close to home, I won't lie. I catch myself doing a version of this when I procrastinate a difficult conversation or a complex project.
Oh, we all do it. What's your go-to excuse?
I'll tell myself, well, I shouldn't email the client now. They're probably having a stressful afternoon and it'll just make things worse. I've basically invented a completely fictional emotional lion in the client's office so I can avoid doing the hard thing.
That is such a perfect modern example.
Yeah.
It is the cognitive dissonance of avoidance. We rarely admit we are just avoiding effort.
No, we always need a good excuse.
Right. Instead, we project a catastrophic risk to make our inaction feel like wisdom. The writer of Proverbs is calling out the human tendency to use irrational fear as an alibi.
That is brilliant.
And this theme of recognizing reality over illusion transitions naturally into how the text handles material resources. Verse 7 delivers one of the most famous financial warnings in history.
Let me guess. The borrower is servant to the lender.
You got it.
It's fascinating that 3 millennia ago, without, FICO scores, compound interest, or algorithmic credit limits, the fundamental power dynamic of debt was identical. It's framed not just as a financial transaction, but as a literal transfer of autonomy.
And in the ancient Near East, that servitude was often quite literal. I mean, if you defaulted, you or your children could be sold into forced labor to pay the debt.
That is terrifying.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
Today, the servitude is structural and psychological. When you are over-leveraged, whether it is a massive car loan, mounting credit card balances, or a mortgage that stretches you to the breaking point, you surrender your freedom of choice.
Because you're tied to those payments.
Exactly. You lose the ability to change careers, to move, or to take a risk on a new idea, because every hour of your future labor has already been promised to the bank.
Your bandwidth is entirely consumed by the obligation, which makes it nearly impossible to execute the other major financial command in this text, which is generosity.
It's a really good point.
Yeah, verse 9 talks about having a bountiful eye and giving bread to the poor. You can't have a bountiful eye if all you can see is your own looming deficit.
No, you can't. Generosity requires margin. What is striking is how the text positions these two concepts. Debt is a mechanism that isolates you and forces you to look inward at your own survival.
It makes you selfish, basically.
Because you have to be. But generosity, having a bountiful eye, is a mechanism that connects you to your community and forces you to look outward. By managing your resources wisely and avoiding the trap of becoming a servant to the lender, you retain the capacity to build social fabric and alleviate suffering around you.
Okay, so if debt is one way we surrender our autonomy, the text suggests that our social circles are another massive vulnerability.
Absolutely.
Verses 24 and 25 carry a very specific warning. They say, "Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to thy soul."
That's such strong language.
It is. And it's not just saying, like, angry people are unpleasant to be around. It's describing a physiological and psychological contagion.
And modern neuroscience backs this up entirely. Humans are highly adaptable social creatures.
We soak up our environment.
Exactly. We have these things called mirror neurons that cause our nervous systems to literally co-regulate with the people around us.
So we sync up with them.
Yes. If you spend your time with someone who is chronically outraged, cynical, or furious, whether that is a colleague in the break room or the primary voices you follow online, your brain begins to adopt their baseline of high arousal and perceived threat.
Wow, you just absorb their anxiety, you start seeing the world through their hypervigilant lens, and suddenly you are manufacturing your own lions in the street because your nervous system thinks everything is a threat.
That's exactly how it works. The text calls it a snare to your soul, which is a perfect metaphor.
Because you don't see it coming.
Right. A snare is a trap you don't see until you're already caught in it. You don't consciously decide to become a furious person. You slowly internalize the behavioral patterns of your environment until they become your own default reactions.
Man, that concept of internalizing patterns brings up one of the most quoted verses in this chapter, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it.
A classic.
We generally apply this to parenting, obviously, and the mechanics of childhood development make it pretty obvious why early inputs matter. But if human brains are constantly adapting to their environment, like we just discussed with the angry man, can we apply this exact same principle of training up to ourselves as adults?
That is a fascinating angle.
Because I'm wondering, how do we rewire adult habits that are already deeply entrenched? Can we change our own inputs?
The mechanism for rewiring ourselves is actually embedded earlier in the chapter. Verse 4 states, "By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life."
Okay, humility.
Yes. Humility is the prerequisite for neuroplasticity. To physically rewire a neural pathway or change a deeply ingrained habit, you first have to embrace the cognitive discomfort of admitting that your current pathway is flawed.
Oh man. So you can't learn something new if your ego is constantly defending your old decisions.
Exactly the point. Humility lowers those ego defenses. It is the state of being teachable.
That makes so much sense.
Right. When you approach your life with humility, you allow your brain to absorb new data, to recognize where you have been acting like the slothful man, or where your financial habits are leading you into servitude. It opens you up to the lifelong cultivation of wisdom, allowing you to intentionally train up your own character, regardless of your age.
Okay, we are right around the 9-minute mark, and we have mapped out incredible practical wisdom here. Building a reputation, refusing to categorize people by wealth, calling out our own irrational fears, protecting our financial autonomy, guarding our emotional boundaries, and utilizing humility to continuously rewire our habits.
It is a brilliant framework for navigating the complexities of modern life.
It really is. But, as we promised at the start, if we stop here, we are just treating Proverbs 22 like a 21st century productivity and self-help book. And that feels like we are missing the foundation of the architecture.
We absolutely would be. If we only extract the life hacks, we completely miss the ultimate why behind the text.
So what is the why?
The writer actually breaks the rhythm of the Proverbs to explicitly state his purpose. In verses 17 through 19, there is a direct, personal plea. He says, "Bow down thine ear and hear the words of the wise, and apply thine heart unto my knowledge."
Okay, getting personal.
Very. And then he delivers the thesis statement for the entire collection. "That thy trust may be in the Lord, I have made known to thee this day."
That thy trust may be in the Lord. So, wait, all of this practical instruction, how to handle a loan, who to eat lunch with, how to view a wealthy neighbor, is essentially a vehicle.
Yes.
The primary objective isn't just to make you successful, it's to build your capacity to trust the divine.
The practical success is just a byproduct. The core objective is relational alignment.
Relational alignment, I like that.
We often make the mistake of compartmentalizing our lives into the practical and the spiritual. We think spirituality happens in moments of meditation or worship, and the rest of the week is just secular survival.
Yeah, Sunday versus Monday through Friday.
Exactly. But this text shatters that division. It argues that the way you manage your money or treat a subordinate is the truest expression of your theology.
Let's look at how that actually plays out in real life. Take the verse about equality, treating the rich and poor with the same dignity because the Lord is the maker of them all.
Good example.
If I actually do that, I'm not just practicing good manners. I am physically acting out my belief in a creator.
You are aligning your behavior with the reality of his design. When you refuse to exploit a power dynamic, you are demonstrating that you believe in a higher authority who values that vulnerable person.
It transforms an ethical choice into an act of worship.
Perfectly said. The same is true for the concept of humility and the fear of the Lord mentioned in verse 4.
You know, the phrase fear of the Lord can sound archaic or, quite frankly, intimidating to a modern ear. But in this context, it seems to imply a deep, reverent awe for the natural order of things.
Yes, awe is a much better word for it.
It's recognizing that you are the creation, not the architect.
It is the ultimate reality check. When you operate with that reverent awe, you stop fighting against the grain of the universe.
You just accept the rules.
You accept that actions have inevitable consequences, that pride isolates, that debt enslaves, that anger infects. By practicing these proverbs daily, you are essentially gathering empirical data. You are participating in evidence-based trust.
Evidence-based trust. Wow, I really like that. It means faith isn't just blind leaks in the dark. It's an expanding confidence based on lived experience.
That's exactly what it is.
You test the proverb by cultivating a bountiful eye and being generous. And when you experience the genuine joy and community it brings, your trust in the wisdom behind it grows.
Yes, and the same goes for the negative examples.
Right. You distance yourself from a chronically furious person, and as you feel your own nervous system regulate and find peace, you realize this ancient guide actually knows what it's talking about.
And this accumulation of small trusts is vital. When you see that the survival guide is profoundly accurate in the mundane, daily habits, your confidence that God can be trusted with the massive existential uncertainties of your life expands.
So it scales up.
It scales up. You learn to trust him with the macro because he has proven faithful in the micro.
That dynamic forces me to reconsider the financial warnings on a much deeper level. We established that being a servant to the lender removes our practical autonomy. But does it go further?
In what way?
Well, does avoiding debt actually free up our spiritual capacity? Like, if I'm constantly stressed about a mountain of consumer debt, am I literally putting up roadblocks that prevent me from serving and trusting God more fully?
It undeniably creates spiritual friction. It echoes the later teaching of Jesus that you cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money.
Right, because you only have so much bandwidth.
Exactly. When your life is heavily leveraged, your primary anxiety, your focus, and the vast majority of your energy are dedicated to appeasing your creditors. You are completely consumed by the demands of the lender.
It's the ultimate shrinking of the horizon. When you are in financial survival mode, your world gets very, very small.
It really does.
It is incredibly difficult to be spiritually sensitive, to listen for a deeper calling, or to notice the needs of your neighbor when your brain is screaming at you about a looming payment deadline.
The anxiety monopolizes your cognitive load. True freedom, which encompasses financial independence, relational health, and emotional boundaries, creates the optimal environment for a thriving relationship with the Creator.
It clears the path.
Exactly. When your resources are not tied up in appeasing a lender, you have the margin to be wildly generous. When your soul is not ensnared by the toxic patterns of an angry person, you have the emotional bandwidth to love the people around you with patience.
So the rigid-sounding rules of Proverbs aren't there to restrict our enjoyment of life. They are actually given to protect us from the things that would enslave us.
They're an invitation to clear the mechanism. When we follow this wisdom, we dismantle the self-imposed traps of pride, unsustainable debt, toxic social contagion, and irrational fears.
We just get out of our own way.
Yes. And in the vast open space that freedom creates, our capacity to lean fully on the Creator isn't just possible. It becomes natural.
It completely flips the script. This dusty ancient guide isn't a list of chores to earn divine approval. It's a map out of the cages we build for ourselves.
That is a beautiful way to put it.
We've uncovered a remarkable amount of ground today. We've seen how this blueprint demands integrity over wealth and insists on the inherent equal dignity of every single human being.
We unpack the psychology of the slothful man's imaginary lion, too.
Yes, the lion in the streets, and why debt is a profound surrender of autonomy.
We have also explored the neuroscience of who we allow to influence us, the power of humility to rewire our habits, and ultimately how all these practical steps are designed to cultivate an evidence-based trust in God.
It is a comprehensive framework for an anchored life. And an anchored life is durable, which leaves us with a fascinating implication for how we live today.
Let's hear it.
We talked about how in the ancient world, a good name was your ultimate currency. Today, our name is often cataloged permanently through our digital footprints. Our search histories, our social media interactions, our public outrage.
Oh, that's a challenging thought.
It really leaves you wondering, if a good name is truly worth more than silver and gold, how does that reframe the way we view the digital trails we leave behind every day? Are we building wealth in our character, or are we just accumulating the cheap currency of passing attention? Knowing all this, how will you apply this information in your life?